Hi everyone, welcome back to the Architect Fitness YouTube channel. I'm Tony, and today we're going to be talking about Diet Cult by Matt Fitzgerald. Is it the best book ever written on nutrition? Let's find out. So what is Diet Cult? Diet Cult is a book released in 2014 by author Matt Fitzgerald, who's also a nutrition coach and endurance athlete. You might be asking yourself, Tony, why are you reviewing a book that's at this point 5 years old? As you know, nutrition science seems to move pretty fast. But here's the interesting thing about the internet age. It's not the best material that rises to the top, it's the best marketed material. With that said, a lot of really great resources never really gain traction in the public eye and kind of fade away into obscurity. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that with exercise and nutrition, everything is cyclical. Everything that is new is also old. Unfortunately, what works isn't that sexy and doesn't sell very well, so people in the fitness industry are always trying to rehash concepts so they continue to sell new products to sell to people. One of my pastimes is collecting old books on fitness and nutrition. I can show you books from the 1920s that discuss the same concepts as books today that are being sold as new and cutting edge. So now that we're in our instant internet age, a 5-year-old book might seem old, but I think the science in it is legit and still holds true today in 2019. In the book, Fitzgerald goes on a massive expose of some of the most popular diet fads and trends and slashes them to bits with science. Although I would have loved to see Fitzgerald cover all of the major fads, which I have a bone to pick with, he does get most of the real big ones, including raw vegans, paleo dieters, low carbers, and the absolute scourge of society, multi-level marketers. So, how does Fitzgerald do this? Well, the book is heavily referenced. If you look through the back, there is a list of every single study that he mentions in the text. He also uses a mix of actual dietary studies, as well as talking with several historians and archaeologists. Because so many diets fall back on what I like to call evolutionary fallacy, which is saying this is how we evolved to eat. By interviewing archaeologists, Fitzgerald can prove whether or not that's true. If we're going to pick on the paleo diet for a moment, paleo dieters say that the body has not evolved to eat legumes, grains, or starches like potatoes. But in the book, Fitzgerald talks with some archaeologists that show that we've been eating potatoes probably longer than almost any other food. One of the reasons for this is potatoes are extremely resilient because they grow underground. This protects them from things like inclement weather or people marching through as far as invading armies in different cultures, and this made the crops really easy to grow. Another point that Fitzgerald rides on is that we don't need to look back millennia to see how we evolved to eat, because food triggers different changes and adaptations in the body in a much quicker way than other evolutionary pathways. As an example of this, in the book he mentions the Lewis and Clark expedition. Now, if you're not familiar with the Lewis and Clark expedition, this is one of the first expeditions of European peoples across North America. What that means is these people were traveling in places they had never been before and eating foods they had never eaten before. They ate a wide variety of foods, including different animals and plants, and managed to survive just fine. In fact, Fitzgerald talks in the book about how in one particular instance, they ate a food that was given to them by a tribe that had lots of fiber in it, and they had never had that much fiber in their diet before. Almost everyone on the expedition got sick. But on the way back, they encountered that same tribe and ate the same food again, and they were fine. Their body had adjusted to eating it in just one go. Really, that's what the book is all about. It's about how adaptable the human body is. Now, this is something I've been saying for a long time. I like to joke that humans are basically cockroaches. We can eat almost anything and survive. And if you look around the world, even in current day, and see the wide variety of diets, you know that to be true. And as someone that both employs a flexible dieting strategy for myself and for my clients with a lot of success, I can tell you that anecdotally, this is also correct. Humans can eat a wide variety of foods, and there is no one true way, which is the term that Fitzgerald uses in his book. Now, I don't want to give the wrong impression. The book isn't just him lambasting all the people he doesn't like. There are some really useful dieting tips for people like you and me. So let's talk about some of those for a minute. One of the biggest takeaways for me from the book is when Fitzgerald talks about the National Weight Control Registry formed by James Hill and Rena Wing. Typically, when scientists are studying weight loss, they come up with a theory of how or why people might lose weight, and then they test that theory in laboratory-type circumstances. Unfortunately, even though people might lose weight during these studies, they're in a controlled laboratory environment. And sometimes these practices are not applicable to people in the real world in their day-to-day lives. So what these two researchers decided to do was, instead of testing a theory in the laboratory, they said, okay, let's go interview people who have successfully lost weight and kept it off and find out what they did, and then we can look for patterns across their stories. They had thousands of applicants apply, and the criteria was, I believe, you had to have lost about 40% of your body weight at your highest weight and kept it off for more than a year. After they analyzed all of the data, they presented their findings at a summit, and what they said was, there was no magic diet. There was no secret food or type of diet that worked best that you could trend across all of these people. So what that proves is there is no magic food. It's not a matter of cutting carbs, cutting fat, taking a specific type of supplement, or avoiding a certain food like grains or meat. But they did find some interesting trends that you can apply to your own fitness journey to help you lose weight if that's your goal. One of the most important things that everyone in the National Weight Control Registry did was they weighed themselves frequently. Maybe not necessarily every day, but at least a few times a week. And why this was important is because it made them more aware of their habits, because they could see the results of those habits on the scale. So a lot of times people gain weight and they know that they're gaining weight, but they don't really think about it because they're not weighing themselves and they're not confronted with that every day. But when people weigh themselves frequently, it's in their conscious mind, so they start to take steps to prevent themselves from gaining weight. The second really important factor that they found was common almost among all of the participants of the research was that the people that lost weight ate monotonously. That means even though some people might have lost weight by cutting out this food and others by cutting out that food, the people that lost weight successfully and kept it off ate similar things to themselves every single day. Now I'm going to interject with why I think that made a difference. When you eat the same things every day, your calorie intake is relatively static and consistent. And if you're going out and eating different types of meals every single day, you're more likely to have huge variances in your average calorie intake. And if you're going out to eat frequently, you could be easily clearing 3,000 calories a day, as restaurant food is usually very calorie dense. So by staying on a more fixed diet and eating the same kinds of things almost every day, your calorie intake is going to be relatively static, and that's going to make your exercise have more of an impact. So now let's talk about the third thing that was really important for all of the participants in this research. Almost all of them included some type of exercise habit. And this is kind of a well duh moment. But here's the thing. While the rest of the world is arguing about, is it carbs making us fat? Is it sugar? Is it fats? Is it grains? Is it meat? The people that look at the legitimate science that has been tested over and over and over again can show you it's just total calories. I'm not saying that the other factors don't matter for general health and how you feel, but if you're talking about total body weight, it's just a matter of calories. So it would make sense that people who are eating a consistent amount of calories and then increasing the amount that they burn by exercising would lose weight. Now there's two last things I want to mention about this research project that really stand out. First, the people who were really successful with their weight loss had tried at least one time before to lose weight and had failed. So that should be encouraging to you if you've tried before and you haven't quite done it. Because in the information age, there's so much bad information for you to sift through, it's not really surprising that you'd give it a go and not succeed, considering that you probably weren't lucky enough to choose the right way the first time. And here's the last point, and possibly the most important. Everyone that successfully lost weight in this research project had continued their eating habits through the weekend and the holidays. So here is something that you might have heard before, the 80-20 rule. That says if you eat healthy 80% of the time, you can slack off 20% of the time and still succeed in your weight loss. What this is saying is that's not exactly true. If you're at a 500 calorie a day deficit Monday through Friday, you have now been in a 2,500 calorie deficit at the end of the week. But going into the weekend, if you eat at 1,000 calorie surplus, which is very easy to do if you're going out for breakfast and or lunch and dinner, you're going to negate that calorie loss throughout the weekdays. So consistency through the weekend is really important. So in this book, Fitzgerald breaks down nutrition to its bare bones and with authority dismantles some of the most popular diet fads out there. So what that means for you is now you should be armed with the confidence that you don't have to eat in some insane and psychotic way to lose weight. You don't need to feel guilty if you break one of these diet cult's rules. Is Diet Cults the best nutrition book of all time? Well, it would have been, save for the last chapter, when Fitzgerald introduces his way of eating. And despite the fact that he spent an entire book writing about how humans can eat a crazy wide variety of foods and still be healthy, he is not able to escape his own bias and upbringing on what he thinks is healthy. So he has what he calls the agnostic eating game. And this is so ridiculously convoluted and nonsensical, I have to read some of it to you. Fitzgerald has a hierarchy of healthy quality foods, and this starts with, you guessed it, just like everyone else thinks, vegetables and fruits. Next on the list is nuts, seeds, and healthy oils, then high quality meat and seafood, then whole grains, dairy, refined grains, low quality meat and seafood, sweets, and fried foods. What's interesting is this entire book seemed like a lead up to promoting the flexible dieting lifestyle. Now, flexible dieting says it doesn't really matter if you get your carbs from a piece of fruit or your carbs from a piece of candy. Your body essentially treats them the same. Now, there are certainly differences in the micronutrients of something like an apple or a piece of candy, but throughout the book, Fitzgerald uses the concepts of being thin and being healthy almost interchangeably. And if we're talking strictly about body weight, it does not matter where those calories come from. If you are in a calorie deficit, you will then lose weight and, according to Fitzgerald, then be healthy. Now, Fitzgerald breaks foods down into 3 groups: essential, recommended, and acceptable. And I think this is funny that he has essential foods on his list because he literally wrote an entire book about how diet cults who tell you must eat certain things are wrong. Now, he makes a distinction of being different from these cults because he doesn't have any forbidden foods on his list. In fact, he says you shouldn't eat a lot of these, but it's okay if you have some. And I suppose in a semantics way, that does make him different from something like veganism, which says as soon as you eat a single piece of meat, you're basically out of the club. Paleo dieters, for example, don't recommend eating grains, but if you do, it's just considered a slip up and you're expected to get right back on the diet. So I do commend Fitzgerald for not including any forbidden foods on his list. However, there are cultures and people who don't eat any vegetables at all, and they're okay. So let's look at how the agnostic healthy eating game actually works. The agnostic healthy eating game is based entirely on the frequency with which types of food are eaten. When you begin to play this game, you will immediately confront the question of what constitutes an occasion of eating a particular type of food. Instead of relying on official serving sizes defined by the government on product labels, I suggest you think in terms of normal portion sizes for you. Examples of normal portion sizes for most people are 1 cup of cooked vegetables, a whole piece of meat or fish, 2 slices of bread, and an 8-ounce tub of yogurt. Some servings should be considered as double or half portions. For example, I would count the onions, tomatoes, and mushrooms in an omelet as a half portion of vegetables, and a 32-ounce of soda I would count as 2 sweets. Composite foods can be even trickier. How do you handle a few slices of pizza with pepperoni and olives? That's gross, who would eat that? Use common sense and make these calls. The pizza crust I would count as a refined grain, the tomato sauce and olives combined as half a portion of vegetables, the cheese as dairy, and the pepperoni as low-quality meat. This isn't science. Oh, really? It's just a science-backed tool for eating well. God has no opinion about how your chicken burrito with rice, pinto beans, lettuce, guacamole, jack cheese, and salsa should be categorized. Figure it out for yourself, with general guidelines I've provided and your common sense. See Appendix A for detailed instructions on classifying foods in agnostic healthy eating games. You may have noticed that my game has no rules considering the overall amount of food that is eaten. This is because you can trust your appetite to ensure that you do not generally overeat if you are obeying the game's one hard and fast rule and getting plenty of aerobic exercise. Are you serious? Okay, let's talk about this a little bit. I'm sure all of you know somebody that exercises like crazy and is still overweight. Because if you're eating more calories than you burn, you are going to gain weight. And now we obviously know that intuitively eating is not working for people with how accessible food is in modern day. That's why everyone is getting heavier. The heaviest people in our society are getting heavier. The lightest people in our society are getting heavier. Globally, humans are getting heavier. How can you overlook the fact that people cannot trust their appetite to guide them and their body weight? Now, Fitzgerald dogs on weight training a little bit in the book, and I can overlook that. He seems like a cardio guy. He does marathons and triathlons and endurance sports. He even says that he thinks endurance athletes are the healthiest people in the world, which is not true, but that's okay. What he overlooks is there's a ton of great reasons to do weight training that have nothing to do with your body weight. And I'm not going to get into that right now, but the point is you cannot out exercise your diet if you are in a calorie surplus. So adding in aerobic exercise is a great way to keep your heart healthy and have an additional output of calories every day, but you still have to know how many calories you're eating. In 2019, when we can get relatively accurate ideas of how many calories we need and how many calories we are eating, there is no reason to play any game other than managing your macros. Trying to lose weight without knowing how many calories you're eating is kind of like playing darts with a blindfold on. There's no reason to have these crazy lists of foods and their vague definitions of healthy or unhealthy or essential or acceptable and assigning points to them and tallying your average every week. A game you can play instead is track your macros, know how much you're eating. If you're not losing weight, eat a little bit less and exercise a little bit more. Now, there's a ton of reasons to avoid foods like fried foods and sweets, and that is they're super calorie dense and they're not very filling, so it challenges your willpower to not overeat them. Whole foods, on the other hand, are very calorie sparse but very filling, so it makes them more difficult to overeat. But with that said, if you're an adult and you're in control of yourself, which you should be, you can easily eat any food that you enjoy and eat it at a calorie deficit and still lose weight. Even with the ridiculousness of Fitzgerald's last chapter and the asinine rules of his agnostic healthy eating game, I still would recommend this book because it's going to smash your food bias to bits. And that's what you really need to do if you really want to take control of your nutrition. As someone who's lost over 60 pounds, I can tell you there is absolutely no secret to it. There's no superfood. There's no food that's going to make you fat by default. What the key is being consistently in a calorie deficit. Eating at a small calorie deficit will make you lose weight, but not at a pace that you find yourself to be terribly hungry all the time, making it extremely manageable. If you guys found this video helpful, please share it with a friend. If you want to buy the book, I'll provide a link in the description below. And if you're Mr. Fitzgerald watching this, commend you. You did an excellent job, but I think it's time to update that last chapter.